You're listening to LoopIt Radio. Today's episode features Sandra and Alex. Let's loop it.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are embarking on a deep dive that honestly should fundamentally recalibrate your entire worldview of the global economy. If you think the world is still sort of neatly divided into rich nations and poor nations, well, this data is probably going to prove you wrong.
Yeah. Our mission today is really a shortcut to being truly well-informed about global wealth distribution. It's a concept where, many people hold deeply outdated assumptions.
Right.
We're inspired by comprehensive data sets, particularly those championed by sources like Factfulness, which actually visualize the entire world population based on income and GDP per capita.
And we aren't just reading statistics here. We're going to start with the poorest person on Earth, maybe a farmer struggling on less than $2 a day.
Yeah.
And we are going to climb the global income ladder tier by tier until we reach the heights of billionaires like Elon Musk. We really want you to understand the life attached to each dollar amount.
Absolutely. But before we begin that climb, let's set the stage with two crucial questions.
Okay.
These questions, they really reveal just how skewed the global narrative has become.
Okay.
When presented with these facts, initially, less than 2% of people actually get both answers correct. So hold your assumptions close because, well, they're probably about to be challenged.
All right, I'm ready. Question 1. Where does the majority of the world population live? Is it A, low-income countries, B, middle-income countries, or C, high-income countries?
And the second question, which I think feels deeply counterintuitive given all the headlines about surging billionaire fortunes.
Yeah, definitely.
Since the year 2000, has global wealth inequality A, increased, B, stayed the same, or C, decreased?
Okay. We'll revisit those answers later, but keeping that uncertainty in mind, knowing your initial guess is, well, likely wrong, let's start climbing the wealth tiers right now.
Let's do it. We begin at Tier 1, extreme poverty. When we rank countries by the lowest GDP per capita, the bottom 10 are overwhelmingly clustered in Central and East Africa. Our initial focus country here is Burundi, consistently ranked as one of the lowest globally.
And this group, which represents, about 3.6% of the global population?
That's right, just under 4%. They face incredibly harsh economic realities. In Burundi, the median daily wage is staggeringly low, around $1.88 per day.
Wow. And we need to clarify what that means, right? This isn't just spending money.
No, this is the total pool of resources available for an entire family unit. Everything.
And the reasons for this low GDP, they're complex, I imagine.
Oh, absolutely. Often rooted in geopolitical instability, poor infrastructure, and a heavy reliance on subsistence farming.
So just growing enough to eat, basically.
Pretty much. When almost everyone is focused on that, there's almost no capital left over to invest in infrastructure, education, or technology that would drive economic growth. It's a tough cycle.
And the effects just cascade through society, don't they? Like high fertility rates.
Exactly. The average fertility rate in this tier is high, often around 5 children per woman. And this is, it's a crucial economic decision, not simply a cultural preference.
Right, because child mortality is so high.
Tragically high, yes. We see about 5% of children here not surviving to their 5th birthday. So having more children becomes a form of social security for later life. It's a way to ensure there's labor for the farm and care for parents in old age.
It's a completely different calculation.
It is. And the living standards documented here really bring the harshness into focus. We have documented cases of families living on as little as 90 cents per day.
90 cents for a whole family.
Yes, they live in houses constructed using mud bricks, not concrete. There's no electricity.
So light and cooking is just fire.
Entirely open fire, which leads to serious health risks from smoke inhalation, as you can imagine.
Yeah, of course. And water.
You have to walk sometimes several kilometers to a natural source, often an open river or well, and carry that water back home. They sleep on straw beds.
It's a constant, physically demanding struggle for basic survival.
That's exactly it. This is the global bottom, and their reality really has to inform our baseline understanding as we move up.
Okay, so where do we go next? Tier 2.
Tier 2. Now, let's widen our lens. We're moving up, adding countries like Ethiopia, Nigeria, Pakistan, and crucially, Bangladesh.
Okay.
This single step lifts us to covering 23% of the world's population.
23%. That's a big jump. And you mentioned Bangladesh.
Yes, we're focusing on Bangladesh, which kind of epitomizes this lower middle income bracket. The median income jumps significantly here to $4.78 per day.
Okay, nearly triple what we saw in Tier 1. That must allow for some immediate improvements.
Huge improvements, structurally. And the demographic shift is instant. The fertility rate drops dramatically to 2.3 children per woman.
Wow, 2.3. That's nearing replacement level, isn't it?
It is. It's a strong early indicator that families are gaining stability, getting access to basic healthcare and education, and they don't need to rely on having large families for economic survival anymore.
What's really fascinating here, I think, is the technological leap you mentioned that happens in this tier.
Yes. We often assume development is this slow generational crawl, right?
Yeah.
But in places like Bangladesh, they're leveraging modern technology much quicker than historical wealthy nations did.
How so? Like infrastructure.
Exactly. You might assume low middle income means barely any infrastructure. But today, over 99% of households in Bangladesh have access to electricity.
99%. That's incredible.
It is. They use pipe wells for safer water. They have basic mobile phones, actual beds, and houses with durable metal roofs instead of fragile straw.
And you had this powerful historical comparison. Something about Portugal.
Ah, yes. This just shatters old stereotypes. The source material points out that Portugal, a firmly high-income European country today, only had 64% of its population connected to electricity back in 1970.
64% in 1970, compared to 99% in Bangladesh now.
Think about that. In some fundamental aspects of utility access, Bangladesh today is more modern, more technologically integrated than Portugal was within, a single generation ago.
That shows incredible speed, globalization, tech transfer.
Exactly. This isn't stagnation. This is rapid convergence.
Okay, and this convergence brings us to what you called aha moment 1, the answer to our first big question.
Precisely. Where does the majority of the world population live? The answer, definitively, is B, middle-income countries.
Middle income. Not low, not high, the middle.
This cannot be overstated. Back in 2000, almost 29% of the world lived in extreme poverty.
Nearly a third.
Yeah. Today, that percentage has fallen to less than a third of that 2000 figure, so maybe around 8 or 9% now.
Wow.
In the space of just one generation, literally billions of people have transitioned out of extreme poverty and into these lower middle and middle classes. The global economic center of gravity has shifted. It's moved away from the extremes and firmly into the middle.
That's a massive shift in perspective already. Okay, so let's keep moving up the ladder. Where does Tier 3 take us?
Tier 3 takes us to the global midpoint. We are now adding enormous populations, including India, vast sections of Asia, Africa, Latin America, until we encompass 50% of the world's population.
Half the world. And the focus country here is?
Indonesia. Here, the median wage stabilizes around $6 per day.
Okay, $6. It might seem like a small jump from Bangladesh's $4.78.
It does, but it represents that critical difference between just survival and stability. Families at this level can start making real economic decisions beyond just food and water.
And the fertility trend continues downward.
Yep, predictable slide. Stabilizes around 2 children per woman, right around replacement. But the biggest societal shift in this tier is actually geography.
Geography. How so?
Most families now live in urban areas, not rural.
Ah, the move to the cities.
This is the definitive developmental migration pattern. People move from the countryside to the city, seeking opportunities that don't depend entirely on, volatile agricultural output.
Sure. Cities offer factory jobs, service jobs, education.
Better infrastructure, exactly. This urbanization really fuels the next level of economic growth.
And the quality of life reflects that urban standard.
Generally, yes. Housing typically includes a dedicated bathroom, a kitchen, separate bedrooms. These are homes, not just shelters.
Right.
More importantly, they have the tools of modern life. Maybe not cars yet, but motorbikes are common, affordable transport.
Yeah.
And crucially, they possess internet access and smartphones. A smartphone at $6 a day isn't a luxury anymore. It's a tool.
A tool for education, communication, banking.
Connecting to the global marketplace. This is how the global middle class participates.
Okay, fascinating. So that's the midpoint. What happens when we cross into the richer half, Tier 4?
Right, Tier 4. We are now firmly in the richer half of the world. We're including Eastern Europe, significant parts of Latin America, and of course, China.
Huge populations again.
Massive. We're going to focus on Brazil here. A large economy, but one grappling with significant internal disparities, which is important later.
Got it. So, Brazil. What's the income level here?
Here, the median wage jumps again, landing around $17 per day.
$17. Okay, now we're talking about a level where a middle-class lifestyle, maybe a modest one by Western standards, starts to become possible for a lot of people.
That's right. And we hit that major demographic turning point. The fertility rate drops to 1.6 children per woman.
1.6, so below replacement level.
Way below. Remember, replacement is generally 2.1. Dropping to 1.6 confirms a profound societal shift. Families are smaller, focused on education, prioritizing quality of life over quantity of children.
But development brings new challenges, right? You mentioned an obesity trade-off.
Yes, this is often surprising. As a country develops and income rises, the health challenges often shift from scarcity, like not enough food, to issues related to lifestyle and diet.
So instead of undernutrition, it's
overnutrition in a way. What's fascinating here, but also deeply concerning, is that in Brazil, the data shows more people die from obesity-related illnesses than from undernutrition.
Really, more die from obesity.
Yes. And this isn't necessarily a sign of universal affluence. It often reflects the higher accessibility and lower cost of processed, high-calorie, low-nutrient foods that are common in rapidly urbanizing environments. Healthier, fresher options can sometimes be harder to get or more expensive.
So the health challenges just change shape.
They really do. It's an indicator that things are changing rapidly.
And possessions at this $17 a day level.
Aspirations shift again. It becomes common for families to own a personal computer. And depending on the country's infrastructure and how spread out things are, maybe a modest car.
Okay, so Brazil's well above the global average, but still maybe not feeling totally secure.
Exactly. Financial security isn't guaranteed. There's still vulnerability.
Right. So Tier 5 must be where we really enter the high-income world.
Precisely. Tier 5. We're pushing toward covering 90% of the world's population now, and we'll look at a mature European economy. Spain.
Okay, Spain. What's the median income there?
It's $41 per day.
$41, okay. That sustained high income translates into, well, what we'd recognize as a comfortable life.
Generally, yes. Excellent quality housing, good access to decent health care, comprehensive social security nets, well-maintained public infrastructure, parks, libraries, that sort of thing.
And this is where you introduce the idea of the freedom dividend.
Yes, which is abstract but incredibly tangible. It's defined by mobility.
Meaning travel.
Exactly. Your passport's power is basically dictated by your country's wealth. A Spanish citizen can travel to 189 countries visa-free.
Wow.
Contrast that with citizens from the lower tiers we discussed. Their country's income level dictates their global mobility. Lower income typically means far fewer visa-free destinations.
Making it hard to do business internationally, get education abroad, or even just vacation.
Impossible, often. The freedom dividend is that automatic, unearned global access granted by being born in a wealthy country with a powerful passport.
Okay, despite these obviously superior living standards compared to most of the world, it feels hard to reconcile Spain's $41 a day comfort with the economic anxiety we hear so much about in the West. Why does it feel stagnant for them?
Yes, that's where we absolutely need to bring in the elephant curve.
The elephant curve, right. Explain that again.
This is crucial. It's based on the work of economist Branko Milanovic, and it perfectly illustrates the winners and losers of, say, the first couple of decades of the 21st century. It explains why the Western middle class feels stuck.
Okay, so visualize the chart. X-axis is global income percentile, poorest on the left, richest on the right.
Correct. And the curve tracks the real income growth for people at each of those percentiles, mostly looking at the period leading up to the 2008 financial crisis, but the trend holds.
Right.
The curve starts low for the very poorest, then rises dramatically. It forms this massive hump, looks like the elephant's body.
And that hump is?
That massive hump represents the global middle-class people around the 40th to 60th global percentile. These are the billions in China, India, Indonesia, Bangladesh we just talked about. They saw massive income gains, huge beneficiaries of globalization.
Okay, the big winners. Then what?
Then the line drops sharply. It flattens out. That's the elephant's neck, or maybe the dip behind its head. This flat line represents the Western middle class.
People in places like Spain. Or the U.S., maybe.
Exactly. Those around the 75th to 85th percentile of global income. This group saw very slow growth, often near 0% annual growth, over maybe 20 years.
So they're still rich globally.
Very rich globally. But their income just didn't keep pace with the growth happening below them or way above them. They feel stagnant because, relative to others, they were.
And the above them part?
That's the elephant's trump shooting straight up at the very end. That's the global top 1%. They captured an astronomical share of the growth, riding technological changes and financial globalization to, well, unprecedented wealth accumulation.
Understanding that flat line, that stagnant Western middle, is key then.
Absolutely key to understanding the political and economic shifts we've seen in the last decade or so. The feeling of being left behind is real for that group.
Okay, so that leads us naturally to Tier 6, the wealthiest countries.
Yes, Tier 6, the absolute top, led by countries like the U.S.
And the median wage there?
Hovers around $62 per day in the U.S.
$62. So compared to Spain's $41, is it just more stuff?
In many ways, yes. The infrastructure and quality of public services aren't necessarily orders of magnitude better, but the personal disposable income is higher. People generally afford more, bigger houses, maybe multiple cars, a higher general volume of consumer goods.
And here's the statistic that really puts it all in perspective. The global top 1% thing.
Yeah, this is truly eye-opening. About 11% to 12% of Americans are currently in the global top 1%.
So if you're a middle-class American listening to this,
you are almost certainly among the world's highest wealth earners, globally speaking.
Well, even if you don't feel rich within the U.S. system.
Exactly. That's the profound psychological disconnect. An individual might feel financially insecure, struggling with debt, college tuition, healthcare costs, but simultaneously, on a global scale, they're part of the elite. Their internal perception of wealth is localized, while their actual purchasing power is internationally top tier.
And that disconnect, that difference between national and global standing, leads us to the next crucial part of this, looking inside the countries.
Yes. So far, we've relied heavily on country averages. But as you just pointed out, with the anxiety of the Western middle class, averages hide vast and often increasing disparities.
Bro.
Now we have to look inside the bubbles and confront the issue of inequality within countries.
Right, because the average doesn't tell the whole story.
Not even close. When we shift to analyzing inequality within borders, the first thing we need to do is be clear about the metric, income versus wealth.
Okay, define those quickly for us.
Sure. Income is pretty straightforward. It's the flow of money someone earns annually, wages, maybe some investment returns, business profits.
Like your salary.
Exactly. Wealth, though, is the accumulated stock of assets. It's your savings, the value of your house, your car, investments, retirement accounts, minus any debts.
Okay, so what you own, not just what you earn.
Precisely. And wealth is generally seen as the better measure of inequality because it represents economic security, power, and crucially, the ability to transfer opportunity across generations. Income can fluctuate year to year, but wealth persists.
Got it. So let's look at income inequality first. How does that look inside countries?
Well, in the U.S., the top 10% of earners take home a pretty hefty 47% of the total national income.
Almost half the income goes to the top 10th.
Yeah. But to see really extreme income disparity, we look at countries like South Africa. It consistently ranks highest globally on this measure. There, the top 10% captures 65% of the total income pool.
65%. Wow. Is there a standard way to measure this, like a single number?
There is. To measure this internal disparity with, technical rigor, we use the Gini coefficient.
Okay, the Gini coefficient, how does that work?
It's the standard measure economists use for statistical dispersion, specifically designed to represent income or wealth distribution within a population.
Right.
A Gini score of 0 represents perfect equality. Everyone has exactly the same income or wealth. A score of 1 represents perfect inequality. One single person has everything.
0 is equal, 1 is unequal.
Yeah.
Where do countries like the U.S. and South Africa fall?
So the U.S. to Gini for income is around 0.48, maybe a bit higher now. That's considered high for an advanced economy. South Africa's income Gini is often cited above 0.6, which is extremely high.
Okay. Now, what happens when we switch the metric from income to wealth? You said that's where it gets even starker.
It skyrockets everywhere. In South Africa, the wealth disparity is just stunning. The top 10% hold almost 86% of the nation's total accumulated wealth.
86%. That leaves just 14% for the other 90% of the population.
Basically, yes. Now compare that with a country known for lower inequality, like the Netherlands. Their Gini coefficient for wealth is much lower. There, the top 10% own about 45% of the wealth.
Still a lot, 45%, but way less concentrated than 86%.
Exactly. While it's still significant concentration, the disparity is far less extreme. It suggests a much stronger middle class that's able to actually accumulate and retain assets over time.
And the trend, globally, for wealth inequality within countries?
The trend is clear and pretty much global. Wealth inequality within most countries has generally increased in recent decades. This is particularly true in the world's richest nations.
Like the U.S.
Yep. In the U.S., for instance, the top 10% owned around 71% of the total wealth in 2021. That's a massive leap from what they held, say, 25 or 30 years prior.
So the gap is actively widening.
It is, and this trend holds true across most of the world's top 10 economies. It's making it harder for younger generations, especially those without inherited wealth, to sort of climb the ladder.
And this isn't just like an unfortunate outcome. There are real structural implications.
Oh, absolutely. Economic research increasingly suggests that societies with very high inequality tend to develop weaker, less responsive institutions over time. Corruption can become more entrenched, social mobility stalls.
And there's this argument, mentioned in the source material, that this rise wasn't inevitable. The political choice idea.
Yes, that's a really important point raised by groups like the World Inequality Lab. They argue that this significant increase in internal inequality wasn't just some natural byproduct of globalization or technology.
So how does inequality become a choice?
They argue the decisive shift happened primarily in the 1980s, heavily influenced by policies pushed by leaders like Ronald Reagan in the U.S. and Margaret Thatcher in the U.K.
Okay, what kind of policies?
The underlying philosophy championed major changes to the tax code specifically, deep tax cuts for the highest earners in corporations.
Right.
That was coupled with widespread financial deregulation, making it easier for capital to move and take risks, and also privatization of many state-owned assets and industries.
Let's break that down. Tax cuts for the wealthy. That means the top tier keeps more money.
Vastly more capital, yes, allowing private wealth to accumulate much faster at the top. Deregulation in finance allowed capital to flow more freely, often into complex financial instruments, benefiting investors significantly.
And privatization, selling off state assets.
Yes, and often reducing government spending in other areas too. This led to a measurable decline in public wealth.
Public wealth. What exactly is that?
Public wealth is basically the total value of assets owned collectively by the state on behalf of the public. Think infrastructure like roads and bridges, public land, state-owned utilities or companies, financial reserves held by the government.
Okay, so the argument is private wealth went way up.
While public wealth, the stuff owned by everyone collectively via the government, went down.
How does a decline in public wealth make it harder to tackle inequality, though?
Well, think about it. If the government owns fewer resources, fewer utilities generating revenue, less land, smaller reserves, it has less independent financial muscle. It has fewer tools to intervene effectively during economic crises or to fund large-scale social programs like massive infrastructure upgrades, universal basic services, or robust safety nets without relying solely on current tax revenues, which might be falling on the middle class.
So the political choice was essentially to shift wealth from the public sphere to the private sphere.
And in doing so, they argue, governments were stripped of some of the very tools needed to counteract the immense accumulation of wealth at the very top, kind of cementing that widening internal gap we see today.
That's a powerful argument. Okay, so we've seen the gaps inside countries widen. Let's now zoom out again and look at the absolute peak, the global top tiers.
Right. Leaving country averages behind entirely. Let's focus on the truly global elite. First, the global 1%.
How much wealth do you need to be in that group?
To qualify, you need a total net wealth assets minus debts of at least $1 million USD.
$1 million. How many people is that?
It's roughly 82 million people worldwide, which sounds like a lot, but remember that's out of nearly 8 billion. It's more people than live in Germany or the UK, though.
And how much of the world's wealth do they own?
Collectively, this global 1% owns a staggering 38% of the world's total wealth.
38%.
No.
Wow. That concentration alone must give them immense influence.
Absolutely. Their political and lobbying power can effectively shape policies globally, potentially counteracting redistribution efforts.
Okay, let's go even higher. The global 0.01%, the 1% of the 1%, basically.
Exactly. To make it into this group, your net wealth needs to be at least $21 million.
21 million. How many people are we talking about now?
Only about 800,000 people globally, a truly minuscule fraction of humanity.
800,000 people owning how much?
They own 11% of the world's wealth. The sheer concentration of capital and power here is immense.
Is that where things like private jets come in?
Yeah, the ancillary data suggests that private jets, sort of the ultimate symbol of ultra wealth, are estimated to be used regularly by about 30% of this 0.01% group. That's only about 0.003% of the entire world population using private jets.
Incredible. And finally, the absolute peak, the billionaires.
The billionaires. Roughly 3,000 individuals worldwide who own at least $1 billion in assets.
3,000 people owning how much?
Collectively, they own about 3% of the world's wealth.
Okay, 3%. It sounds smaller than the 1% or the 0.01% share, but for just 3,000 people.
It's still an enormous concentration, and the peak example, though these things fluctuate constantly, is often Elon Musk.
Right. His net worth at the time of the original source analysis was approaching $400 billion.
Nearly $400 billion, yes. The scale of this accumulation is it's difficult to even wrap your head around mentally.
And you had that calculation about his wealth growth per second.
That's right. It's a striking way to illustrate the scale. Between roughly 2020 and early 2024, Musk's wealth grew at an average rate equivalent to about $1,300 per second.
$1,300 every single second.
Yeah.
I have to stop you there. How is that calculated? Is that like cash pouring in?
No, not cash. It's overwhelmingly based on the valuation of his assets, primarily his stock holdings in companies like Tesla and SpaceX.
Ah, so the rising stock prices.
Exactly. While it's not cash he can spend instantly, it represents the real tradable value of his assets on the market. The point the source material makes with that calculation is that his wealth compounds so incredibly rapidly that theoretically, if he saw a $100 bill lying on the sidewalk, the time it would take him to stop, bend over, and pick it up would actually represent an economic loss for him compared to the rate his existing assets are appreciating in value during those few seconds.
That really puts the scale into perspective. It's not about the $100. It's about the opportunity cost of his time at that level of wealth generation.
Precisely. It just emphasizes the sheer magnitude of capital compounding at the absolute peak.
Okay, so we've climbed the ladder, we've seen the internal gaps widen, we've seen the mind-boggling wealth at the very top. This brings us back finally to our second big question, the counterintuitive one.
The final answer, yes, we ask. Since the year 2000, has global wealth inequality increased, stayed the same, or decreased?
And if you follow the logic of the elephant curve's flat middle, the rising Gini coefficients inside rich countries, the explosion of billionaire wealth, your gut, my gut, everyone's gut probably screamed increased.
It feels obvious, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the surprising fact-based answer, according to the comprehensive data looking at the entire global population, is C, decreased. Global inequality has actually gone down since 2000.
Wait, decreased? How can that be true when the top 1% owns 38% and the bottom 50% owns, what was it, like 2%? That sounds incredibly unequal still. Is this just statistical manipulation?
That skepticism is absolutely crucial, and it's fair. It really boils down to that critical distinction we made earlier, inequality within countries versus inequality between countries.
Okay.
While it's true that inequality within many countries, especially wealthy ones, has gone up, and that rise is a serious internal problem causing real hardship and anxiety.
Right.
The inequality between countries, the gap separating rich nations from poor nations, has gone down significantly more.
So the catching up of poorer countries outweighs the rich getting richer within their own countries, globally speaking.
On a global scale, statistically, yes. The enormous economic lift experienced by billions of people in developing countries, those tiers 2 and 3 we talked about, in places like Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, China.
Yeah.
That upward movement has been a more powerful force in shrinking the overall global gap between the richest and poorest populations than the simultaneous, very real rise of wealth concentration at the very top within nations.
So the rise of the global middle class is the dominant factor in this specific global measure.
Exactly. It has compressed the overall global income and wealth distribution curve. And the data reflects this convergence. For instance, the global top 10% now own around 74% of the wealth. That's still huge, obviously, but critically, it's a smaller total share than they owned, say, back in 2000.
Okay, their slice of the pie shrunk slightly, even if the pie got much bigger.
Right. And while 2.1% is obviously tiny, the bottom 50% now owns a statistically higher proportion of global wealth, however small, than they did back in 2000.
So the historical charts would look different.
Dramatically different. If you look at those bubble charts of global income distribution from, say, 1990, you see a massive, obvious gap. Nearly 40% of the world lived in those clearly defined low-income countries. There were almost two separate humps, the rich world and the poor world.
And today?
Today, because of this monumental progress, the overwhelming majority lives squished together in those middle-income countries. The chart looks more like one big hump. The greatest engine of global progress in the 21st century, statistically speaking, has been those billions climbing out of extreme poverty. That catch-up factor has compressed the global gap between nations.
Okay, That's a really important, complex picture to grasp. It requires holding two seemingly contradictory ideas at once.
It does. Progress and persistent, even worsening problems simultaneously.
All right. This has been a really powerful recalibration of the global picture. For you, the listener, let's try to synthesize the key findings.
Good idea.
First, the big takeaway is that the majority of the world population is now categorized as middle income. That fundamentally changes the old narrative of a bipolar rich versus poor world.
And second, despite what your intuition, your local experience, maybe the headlines suggest, overall global inequality has actually decreased since 2000.
Right. Driven by developing nations catching up, a force statistically larger than the growth captured by the ultra-wealthy at the top.
Exactly. And understanding this complex reality is just essential for having an accurate world picture. Acknowledging the incredible progress that billions have been lifted out of extreme poverty is vital. We have to recognize that. But at the same time, we absolutely have to acknowledge that internal inequality within countries, especially wealthy ones, remains a serious growing concern. It hollows out institutions, it fuels political instability, it creates deep economic anxiety, particularly for that stagnant Western middle class we talked about.
We have to hold both those facts simultaneously. Progress has been made. Any serious problems remain or have even gotten worse in some dimensions.
Precisely. It's not simple.
Okay. So connecting back to that powerful argument near the end, that the rise in internal inequality, that flat line on the elephant curve, might have been significantly driven by political choices.
Yeah, the decline of public wealth alongside the rise of private wealth since the 80s.
It really does raise a necessary question about deliberate policy action moving forward, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
So that's our final provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. If the world's leaders were to collectively decide to prioritize tackling internal wealth inequality, maybe focusing specifically on rebuilding some of that public wealth that has declined, what specific policies, maybe besides just direct taxation, could be most effective? Thinking about the global trends we just discussed, urbanization, technology, the need for strong institutions, what might actually reshape those wealth distribution curves within nations over the next 20 years?
And crucially, how do we bolster the economic security of that Western middle class, address their stagnation, without inadvertently undermining the growth engine of the global middle that has driven so much positive change?
That's the challenge. Finding policies that work for both. That's your next deep dive.
Thank you so much to Alex and Sandra for being here and contributing to today's discussion. We'll see you in the next episode.